They say time heals all wounds, but no one ever said anything about the wounds left untouched, festering beneath the surface, buried in silence and bitter memories. Elijah stood motionless at the edge of the cracked driveway, the rain falling in steady, unforgiving sheets, drumming a relentless rhythm against the faded roof of the old Summers house. He didn't want to be here. He wasn't sure he ever had. Yet, the letter in his pocket burned against his thigh like a brand, pulling him forward with a force that felt like fate itself. His fingers trembled as he reached for the rusted gate, its hinges groaning a tired welcome. The garden beyond was overgrown, wild weeds choking the cracked stone path as if trying to erase all traces of the past. But no matter how much nature tried to reclaim the space, Elijah's memories clung to every broken window, every peeling shutter, every whispered echo of laughter and rage. Inside the house, the air was thick with dust and regret. The walls, once bright with family photos and painted dreams, now stood bare and silent, witnesses to a family fractured by secrets too heavy to bear. Elijah's breath hitched as his gaze landed on the living room mantelpiece, where a single photograph remained, stubbornly refusing to fade with time. 2 children, their faces almost identical except for the sharpness in one's eyes and the softness in the other's. A brother and sister, bound not just by blood, but by a fierce love that had been buried beneath jealousy, betrayal, and years of silence. Mara. The name caught in his throat like a bitter pill. The sister he hadn't spoken to in over a decade, the only person who truly knew the darkness lurking behind the walls of their childhood home, and the only one who had fled from it as far as she could. But now, they were back in the same town, back under the same gray skies, and the cruel twist of fate had made them neighbors once again, reborn as children of 2 families who had no idea what blood they carried. Elijah closed his eyes, swallowing the tight knot of guilt and longing. He could almost hear her voice, sharp, defiant, and aching with a history only they shared. You left me alone. You abandoned us. And yet, he had never left. Not really. A sudden crack of thunder shattered the silence, jolting Elijah back to the present. His phone buzzed sharply in his coat pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands. A message. It's time. We need to talk. The words were simple. The weight of them, immense. On the other side of town, Mara sat curled on her threadbare couch, staring at her own phone. The same message glowed on her screen. The house she had just inherited loomed in her mind, a place she vowed never to return to, yet couldn't escape. Her fingers tightened around the device as a single tear slid down her cheek. Memories surged unbidden, shouts in the dark, slammed doors in the cold space where Elijah's laughter used to be. They were ghosts now, both of them, ghosts reborn into new lives, carrying the old scars beneath their skins. And neither knew if the fire rekindled between them would burn away the past or consume them both. Because some wounds never heal. They only wait. The next morning came cloaked in an uneasy stillness. The storm had passed, but the sky remained a cold, unforgiving gray, casting long shadows over the sleepy street where the 2 houses stood like old sentinels, silent witnesses to the secrets they guarded. Elijah stepped out of his modest home at 48 Maple Avenue, the damp earth sinking slightly beneath his worn boots. The air smelled faintly of wet pine and earth, but to him it was saturated with something heavier. Anticipation, dread, a promise he could neither ignore nor fully understand. Across the street, Mara stood on the peeling porch of 47 Maple Avenue, clutching a cup of lukewarm coffee, her knuckles white against the ceramic. The house looked smaller than she remembered, diminished somehow by years of neglect and the absence of life. Yet beneath the decay, the essence of childhood haunted every corner, a ghost of laughter, pain, and love lost. Her gaze drifted toward the hedge separating their yards. It was overgrown, wild vines threatening to spill over like their tangled history. She saw movement, a figure emerging from behind the elm tree that marked the boundary. Elijah. Their eyes met across the divide, 2 souls weathered by time and sorrow, connected by blood, but divided by a chasm of unspoken words. For a long moment, neither moved. Mara's breath caught, memories flashing like lightning. Elijah's stubborn grin, the furious fights that ended in tears, the cold silence that followed. He raised a hand, hesitant, almost fragile. Mara's heart twisted. She wanted to yell, to accuse, to run, but the years had stolen her strength. Instead, she nodded. Elijah crossed the cracked pavement, each step slow, measured. When he reached the gate, he hesitated, then pushed it open with a rusty creak that echoed like a warning. "Hi," he said finally, voice rough but steady. "Hi," Mara replied, the single word heavy with everything left unsaid. He glanced toward the house, then back at her. "I didn't think we'd end up this close." "Neither did I," Mara admitted, her eyes flickering away to the wild garden. They stood there, two strangers bound by a shared past, feeling the fragile threads of connection strain and fray under the weight of years. Suddenly, a sharp breeze swept through the street, carrying with it the scent of rain yet to come. Elijah broke the silence. "We can't keep pretending none of this happened." Mara's eyes flashed with pain and anger. "Pretending? You walked away, Elijah. You left me to carry everything alone." His jaw clenched, old wounds surfacing. "I didn't leave. I was pushed away." "You think I wanted this?" The words hung between them like a storm about to break. But beneath the fury, a flicker of something else. Regret, longing, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the bond they lost could be found again. Mara stepped forward, lowering her voice. "Maybe it's time we stop running." Elijah met her gaze, the years of silence cracking like shattered glass. "Maybe," he said softly. And in that moment, beneath the gathering clouds and the looming shadows of their past, two siblings began the fragile journey toward healing, toward rediscovering a love that had never truly died. The days that followed were soaked in an uneasy silence, a fragile truce hovering between Elijah and Mara like a threadbare veil. The neighborhood carried on its steady rhythm, unaware of the quiet reckoning unfolding between two souls bound by blood and burden. Mara woke each morning with a restless ache nestled deep inside, a hollow space that neither time nor distance had filled. Her fingers would instinctively reach for the phone, poised to call Elijah, then falter, swallowed by a sea of memories too sharp to face head-on. Elijah, too, found himself pacing the dim corridors of his home, the letter that brought him back to Maple Avenue folded neatly on the kitchen table. It was a summons, a challenge, a reminder that the past was not done with them yet. He could almost hear their mother's voice whispering from the shadows, words he had both cherished and resented all his life. "Family is blood, Eli. No matter the fights, no matter the pain, you can never run from it." The irony was cruel. One late afternoon, Mara found herself standing at the edge of her overgrown garden, eyes tracing the tangled branches that mirrored the labyrinth of her own thoughts. A sudden knock startled her. Soft, hesitant. She opened the door to find Elijah standing there, hands shoved deep in the pockets of his jacket, eyes searching hers. "I thought, maybe we could start with something small," he said, voice low. "Like what?" Mara asked, suspicion flickering beneath her guarded calm. "Like tea, at the kitchen table. No past, no accusations. Just us." Mara hesitated, the walls she'd built trembling under the weight of a lifetime's wounds. But beneath it all, a flicker of longing, of the brother she once knew, kindled in her chest. "All right," she whispered. The kitchen was small and cluttered, a patchwork of faded memories and new beginnings. They sat across from each other, the steam rising between them like a fragile bridge. For a while, words faltered, hovering on the brink of confession but never crossing the threshold. Then Elijah spoke, voice rough but earnest. "I never stopped thinking about you, Mara. About us. Even when I was gone, even when everything broke." Tears pricked at her eyes, the ache of years compressed into a single moment. "I blamed you," she admitted. "For leaving me behind." "I didn't leave," he insisted gently. "I was forced out, and I hated every second." Their shared pain unfolded between them, tentative but real. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying away the remnants of the storm. In that small kitchen, beneath the flickering light and fading daylight, two siblings took the first fragile steps toward mending the broken pieces of their past. Because sometimes, love lingers beneath the ruins, waiting for the courage to rise again. The house at 47 Maple Avenue creaked with the weight of its own history, groaning softly like an old beast stirred from a long slumber. Shadows stretched across the faded wallpaper, tracing patterns that only Mara and Elijah could recognize, silent witnesses to a childhood fractured by silence and pain. In the days after their tentative tea, Mara found herself drawn back to the attic, the place they had both avoided for years. She had come here once as a child, chasing sunlight through the dusty windows, her small hands clutching at fragments of hope. Now, as an adult, the space felt suffocating, heavy with the secrets that had split their family apart. Elijah stood beside her, the air thick with unspoken questions. His fingers brushed over an old, leather-bound journal lying forgotten on a rickety shelf. "Did Mom write this?" Mara asked quietly. He nodded. "She wanted us to have it someday. Said it might explain things." Opening the journal, Mara's eyes scanned the cramped, hurried script, pages filled with confessions, regrets, and fears she'd never known. The entry spoke of love turned bitter, of promises broken, and of a secret that had festered in the heart of their family like a poison. A man named Victor, a trusted friend turned betrayer, whose lies had fractured their parents' marriage and torn Elijah and Mara apart. Mara's breath caught as she read the words that explained so much of the silence, the absence, and the wounds neither sibling had dared to speak aloud. "Elijah," she whispered, voice trembling, "we were pawns in something bigger than us." He looked up, eyes dark with pain and determination, "and we've been paying for it ever since." The revelation hung between them, heavy and raw, but also freeing. For the first time, the blame they had carried began to shift, from each other to the shadows that had cast their lives into turmoil. That night, they sat beneath the old elm tree in Mara's yard, the sky above clear and endless. The stars blinked down like distant promises, and for the first time in years, Elijah reached out and took Mara's hand. "We don't have to be prisoners of the past," he said softly. "We can write a new story. Together." Mara squeezed his hand, tears shining in the moonlight. "I want that. I want us back." But even as hope stirred, the past was never far behind. Whispers of old enemies, the threat of betrayal, and the scars etched deep into their family's history promised that the path to healing would be fraught with challenges. Because sometimes the fiercest rivalries are born not of hatred, but of love, loss, and the desperate fight to hold on. And sometimes, to truly be free, you must face the darkest truths, even if it means breaking the fragile peace you've just found. The morning light seeped through the cracked blinds of Mara's bedroom, casting pale stripes across the cluttered floor. It was quiet, too quiet, but Mara welcomed the calm. It was the fragile kind of peace that felt like the eye of a storm, a brief respite before everything came crashing back. She sat on the edge of her bed, the leather-bound journal resting open in her lap, the pages filled with their mother's trembling handwriting. Each word carved a path through Mara's heart, a map of pain and secrets she'd never known, a history that explained everything yet left so many questions unanswered. Elijah was already awake, pacing the kitchen in the neighboring house, the soft scrape of his footsteps echoing through the thin walls. His mind raced with the same unspoken fears and hopes Mara wrestled with. Could they really rebuild what had been broken? And what dangers still lurked in the shadows of their family's past? The siblings met later that morning at the local coffee shop, a modest place just down the street from their childhood homes. The air inside smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries, a stark contrast to the cold heaviness of their conversation. Mara folded her hands tightly, staring into the swirling patterns of cream in her coffee. Mom's journal. "It's like reading a different person," she said quietly. "I never really knew her fears, or the things she tried to protect us from." Elijah nodded, his jaw tight. "And the lies, Victor's lies, destroyed everything." She wrote about how he poisoned Dad's mind, how he made him suspicious of us, of each other. A shiver passed through Mara, the memory of years spent in silence, suddenly illuminated by new understanding. "It wasn't our fault," she said softly. "Not ours. But it's hard to forget the way it felt," Elijah replied, voice raw. "The way we blamed each other. How the silence stretched between us like an ocean." They sat in silence, the hum of the cafe around them unnoticed. Outside, the city moved on unaware, but Mara and Elijah were caught in a fragile moment, two souls trying to stitch together the torn fabric of their shared past. That afternoon, Mara returned home and climbed into the attic, the room that held so many forgotten memories. Dust motes floated in shafts of sunlight as she unearthed old boxes filled with relics of their childhood, cracked toys, school awards, a broken music box. Her fingers lingered on a faded scrapbook. Inside were letters, handwritten notes from their mother, faded but full of love and regret. One in particular caught her eye, addressed to Elijah but never sent. "My dear Eli, I know you carry the weight of our broken family. Please remember, even in the darkest times, my love is with you. Trust Mara, trust yourself, and hold on to hope." Mara's breath caught, tears blurring her vision. She clutched the letter close, feeling a sudden surge of determination. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Elijah's phone buzzed with an unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Eli." A voice hissed, cold and familiar. "You think you can come back and fix what's broken? You're just stirring up old ghosts. Leave the past buried." Elijah's grip tightened. "Who is this?" "Just a friend reminding you. Some secrets should stay hidden, or you'll lose everything." The call ended abruptly, leaving Elijah staring into the darkening room, the weight of threats settling like a stone in his chest. Days passed with a nervous tension hanging over them. Mara and Elijah met often, sharing stories, piecing together fragments of their past, and building a cautious trust. Yet, the shadow of the threat lingered, unseen but unmistakable. One evening, beneath the elm tree that had witnessed their tentative reunion, Mara looked up at Elijah. "Do you think we can really escape it all?" she asked. "The lies, the pain, the betrayal?" He took her hand firmly. "I don't know. But if we face it together, maybe, just maybe, we can." She nodded, swallowing hard. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, they weren't walking it alone. The early morning fog clung thick to the streets of Maple Avenue, wrapping each house like a shroud. The world seemed muted, colors dulled to grays and blues, sounds softened to whispers, perfect for secrets to move unnoticed, for truths to be buried deeper beneath layers of silence. Inside Mara's modest living room, a single lamp cast a warm glow against the pale walls. The worn leather couch sagged under the weight of memories and sleepless nights. Mara sat curled up, clutching her knees as the journal lay open on the coffee table, the yellowed pages fluttering with the faintest breeze from a cracked window. Her mind was a tangle of fragments, snatches of her mother's words, the cold threat whispered to Elijah, the invisible strings pulling them ever closer to danger. She rose and paced slowly, the creak of floorboards beneath her feet the only sound in the heavy quiet. Each step echoed her unease. What if the past isn't done with us? She wondered. What if the secrets we uncovered are only the surface? That afternoon, Elijah arrived at Mara's door without knocking, his face drawn and pale, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. His hands trembled slightly as he stepped inside, dropping a crumpled envelope onto the kitchen table. "I found this slipped under my door," he said, voice low. Mara unfolded the letter, eyes scanning the sharp, typed message. "Stop digging. Leave the Summers family alone or suffer the consequences." No signature, no hint of mercy. Mara's lips pressed into a thin line, but beneath her calm exterior, a fierce determination burned. "Whoever sent this wants us to be afraid," she said quietly. "But they don't know us anymore." Elijah nodded, his gaze fierce. "They underestimated how far we're willing to go." Later that night, the quiet of Mara's home shattered when the sharp clang of metal echoed outside, a chain rattling, a gate pushed open. Mara's heart hammered as she grabbed her phone, dialing Elijah. "Stay calm," he whispered when he answered. "I'm on my way." Outside, the fog thickened, shadows twisting into shapes that seemed almost alive. Mara peered through the curtains, catching sight of a figure slipping quickly between the houses. Her breath caught. When Elijah arrived, they searched the yard together, finding only scattered leaves and disturbed earth, a silent message from whoever haunted their past. Days blurred into restless nights as Mara and Elijah plunged deeper into their mother's journal, piecing together a puzzle far larger and darker than they had imagined. The entries revealed a clandestine web of lies, betrayal, and desperation, a story of a woman caught between love and duty, forced to protect her children from a powerful enemy who would stop at nothing. Elijah's voice cracked as he read aloud a passage. "If you find this, know that I fought to keep you safe, but some secrets must stay buried. For your sake, trust no one." The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows longer. Amidst the darkness, moments of light flickered, small victories, tentative trust rebuilt. One afternoon, Mara and Elijah walked the overgrown path through the woods behind their neighborhood. The sun pierced through the canopy in golden shafts, birdsong a delicate counterpoint to their heavy thoughts. They spoke openly for the first time, not as estranged siblings, but as allies. "I don't want to lose you again," Mara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elijah squeezed her hand. "You won't. This time, we face everything together." As they stood beneath the ancient oaks, the wind whispered promises of healing, and for a moment the past seemed just a shadow behind them, no longer a cage, but a path forward. The house at 47 Maple Avenue seemed to breathe beneath the weight of its own memories, its wooden floors creaking softly under Mara's careful steps as she moved through rooms thick with dust and shadows. Outside, the sky had turned a bruised purple, the heavy clouds gathering as if nature itself mourned the secrets that haunted this place. Mara paused by the cracked window in the living room, her fingers tracing the condensation that blurred the view of the overgrown garden. Somewhere beyond the wild tangles of ivy and weeds, Elijah was clearing the front walkway, methodical and quiet. Watching him, Mara felt the pull of years lost, words left unsaid, and wounds never fully healed. Their reunion was fragile, a delicate dance between old pain and the faint flicker of hope. Neither dared to speak the truths that lingered unspoken between them, the accusations, the regrets, the silent blame. Elijah wiped sweat from his brow, pausing as Mara stepped outside, her gaze steady but guarded. "You never asked why I left," he said finally, voice low and rough. Mara's eyes narrowed, a flash of hurt and anger surfacing. "Because you never told me." He met her gaze, his own filled with a mixture of guilt and defiance. "I was scared. Not of you, but of everything else. The lies, the fighting, the way Dad looked at me like I was a stranger." Her breath caught. "You left me alone in the storm. I didn't have a choice," he whispered. Victor made sure of that. The man poisoned Dad's mind, made him doubt everything. Us, Mom, you and me. The words hung heavy between them, a fragile bridge built on shared pain. That evening, they sat side by side at the kitchen table, their mother's journal spread open before them. The yellowed pages revealed a woman desperate to protect her family, caught in a web of deceit that tightened with every passing day. Mara read aloud from a passage, her voice trembling. "Victor was more than a friend. He was the snake in our garden. He whispered lies, turning love into suspicion. I fear what he will do if we uncover the truth." Elijah's fists clenched. "He's still out there, and he knows we're looking." The siblings exchanged a glance, the unspoken promise clear. They would not back down, no matter the cost. Late that night, as rain began tapping against the window panes, Mara's phone buzzed with an unknown number. A message appeared: "Stop digging or face the consequences." Her heart raced, but she typed back firmly, "We're not afraid." Seconds later, the reply came: "Fear is a lesson. Learn it well." The line went dead. The next morning, Mara and Elijah met beneath the elm tree, their silent witness through years of pain and distance. "We're in this together," Elijah said, the weight of the threat heavy in his tone. Mara nodded, steeling herself. "We have to be smart. Victor's reach is long." They spoke in hushed tones, planning their next moves, aware that the shadows closing around them were more dangerous than either had imagined. Days later, a knock at the door startled Mara. Standing there was an elderly woman, eyes sharp despite the years. "I'm Mrs. Hawkins," she said. "I knew your mother. There are things you don't know. Things that might help. Reluctantly, Mara let her in, sensing that their journey into the past was only just beginning, and that every step forward risked dragging them deeper into a darkness that threatened to consume them all. The afternoon sun was a pale, wan light filtering through the stained glass windows of Mara's living room as Mrs. Hawkins settled into the threadbare armchair with the quiet dignity of one who had witnessed far more than most. The air between the three of them was thick with anticipation. Mara on the edge of her seat, Elijah leaning forward, his expression guarded but hungry for answers. Mrs. Hawkins adjusted her glasses, her gaze steady as she began to speak. "Your mother was a woman of incredible strength," she said softly, voice carrying the weight of memory. "But also a woman burdened by secrets. The kind that can break a family if left unspoken." Mara swallowed hard, gripping the arm of the couch. "We found her journal. She talked about Victor, about lies, betrayal, but we don't know the full story." Mrs. Hawkins nodded slowly. "Victor was never just a friend. He was involved in things darker than you can imagine. Manipulations, threats. He played your family like a chessboard." Elijah's eyes darkened. "Why? What did he want?" "That's what your mother feared the most," Mrs. Hawkins replied, voice dropping to a whisper. "Power. Control. And your family was in the way." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small, worn envelope, handing it to Mara. "This was hidden in your mother's things. She wanted you to have it if anything happened." Mara's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, faded and creased, showing meetings between Victor and shadowy figures Mara didn't recognize, alongside newspaper clippings hinting at corruption and scandal. As Mara and Elijah studied the photographs, the pieces of the puzzle began to align. Victor was connected to a network of powerful people who had reasons to silence the Summers family. Their mother had fought desperately to protect them, but in doing so had become a target. Elijah's jaw clenched as he traced a finger over a photograph showing Victor shaking hands with a suited man whose face was partially obscured by shadow. "This goes deeper than we thought." Mara looked up, determination flashing in her eyes. "We need to find out who he is. We need to finish what Mom started." The days that followed were a whirlwind of research and hushed conversations. Mara and Elijah pored over old news archives, connected with distant family friends, and even contacted a private investigator recommended by Mrs. Hawkins. Their alliance grew stronger, but so did the risks. Strange cars parked near their homes, phone calls that went unanswered, and the ever-present feeling of being watched weighed heavily on them. One night, as they sat reviewing documents under the flickering light of a desk lamp, Elijah suddenly stiffened. "There," he said, pointing to a grainy photo. "That's the man from the picture, the one with Victor. His name's Gregory Cole, a politician with a reputation for dirty deals." Mara's heart pounded. If we expose them, it could bring everything crashing down. But truth came with a price. That same night, Mara's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but papers and books lay scattered, a clear warning. Mara and Elijah stood amidst the chaos the next morning, silence hanging heavy. "They're close," Mara whispered. "They're trying to scare us." Elijah placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "We won't back down." In that moment, beneath the weight of threats and shadows, they found a shared resolve. The fight for their family's name, their own future, and the love long buried beneath years of pain had only just begun. The weeks that followed the break-in transformed Mara and Elijah's once fragile hope into a relentless battle. Their lives, once confined within the safe boundaries of everyday routine, had now become a battleground. Every shadow, every sudden noise, became a potential threat. Yet beneath the weight of fear, something stronger was taking root. A fierce determination to uncover the truth and reclaim what was stolen from them. Mara sat at the edge of her bed, hands trembling as she scrolled through the endless stream of messages from the private investigator. Each update was a thread, pulling them deeper into a web of corruption. Gregory Cole was not just a politician. He was the head of a powerful faction willing to bury anyone who dared expose him. Her phone buzzed again. It was Elijah. "Meet me at the cafe. We need to talk." Minutes later, Mara found Elijah waiting at their usual spot. his face etched with exhaustion and something else. Vulnerability. "Sit," he said softly. "We can't keep doing this alone." She nodded, and for the first time, the walls between them cracked just enough to let the rawness through. The cafe was nearly empty, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the worn wooden tables. Mara reached across, her hand brushing Elijah's. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Scared that we're in over our heads." Elijah's eyes softened. "Me too. But running away won't save us. We have to face this, together." They shared a rare moment of closeness, their past grievances melting away under the simple warmth of shared fear and hope. But the world outside was closing in. Elijah's phone vibrated sharply. The screen displayed an unknown number. "Stop digging, or your past will bury you." He silenced it without opening the message, but the threat lingered like a poison in his veins. Mara's place was no safer. The private investigator called with news that Gregory Cole's influence extended far beyond what they'd imagined. Connections in law enforcement, media, and even the local government. "We're fighting shadows," Mara whispered, frustration and despair mingling in her voice. Elijah's jaw clenched. "Then we become the light." Amidst the storm, Mara and Elijah sought solace in small things: a shared meal, a walk beneath the elm tree, stolen laughter as they recalled childhood memories long buried. One evening, as twilight bathed the street in soft purple hues, Mara confided, "Do you remember the treehouse we built? How we thought it was a fortress against the world?" Elijah smiled faintly. "Maybe we can build a new one. Not of wood, but of trust." Their eyes met, a silent promise hanging between them. A vow to rebuild what was lost, no matter how fragile. But the past was relentless. One night, Elijah returned home to find a single envelope on his doorstep. Inside was a photograph, a candid shot of Mara, taken without her knowledge, her face etched with vulnerability. Attached was a note. "This is only the beginning." His blood ran cold. He called Mara immediately. "We can't wait," he said, voice tight with urgency. "We need to confront this head-on." The siblings stood together in the flickering candlelight, the shadows of their home dancing around them like specters of the past. They knew the road ahead was treacherous, but also knew they could no longer walk it apart. With every threat, every secret uncovered, their bond grew stronger. Two fractured souls finding strength in shared pain and the unbreakable ties of family. And as the storm outside raged on, so too did the fire within them. A fire that would not be extinguished until the truth was brought to light. The late afternoon sun was retreating behind a slate-gray horizon, as Mara and Elijah stepped cautiously into the cavernous, dimly lit office building downtown. The stale scent of polished wood and cold metal hung thick in the air, a stark reminder of the power and corruption festering within these walls. They had traced Gregory Cole's movements here, a hub of influence where whispered deals were made behind closed doors, and where their family's fate now dangled precariously. Elijah's heart hammered against his ribs, every step echoing through the marble halls like a drumbeat of impending reckoning. Mara moved beside him, steady but alert, her gaze sharp beneath the low brim of her hat. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered, the vulnerability in her voice betraying years of buried fear. Elijah nodded. "We've come too far to turn back now." Their footsteps led them to a heavily secured conference room. Beyond the thick glass, shadows shifted, silhouettes of men in expensive suits, their voices low and cold. Through a narrow gap in the blinds, Mara spotted Gregory Cole at the center, a commanding presence radiating arrogance and menace. His piercing eyes scanned a dossier laid out before him, documents Mara and Elijah recognized all too well. She swallowed hard. "That's him." Elijah's jaw tightened. Time to end this. Before they could retreat, the door swung open abruptly. Two security guards blocked their path, expressions unreadable but unyielding. "State your business," one barked. Mara stepped forward, voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "We're here to expose Gregory Cole, to reveal the truth he's buried for years." A tense silence followed. The second guard smirked. Brave words. But naive. Suddenly, the glass walls trembled as footsteps approached, powerful, deliberate. Cole emerged, flanked by his aides, his gaze icy and unforgiving. "Well, well," he sneered. "The prodigal children return. What makes you think you can threaten me?" Elijah met his gaze unflinchingly. "Because the truth can't be buried forever." Cole laughed, a harsh, chilling sound. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. I hold the strings that keep this city alive. You're nothing but ants beneath my feet." Mara stepped forward, voice ringing clear. "Maybe. But even ants can bring down giants." The tension exploded as aides moved to detain them, but Mara and Elijah fought with a desperate, fierce resolve born of years of pain and hope. Their narrow escape was frantic, a blur of shadows, pounding footsteps, and the roar of adrenaline-fueled hearts. Outside, the city lights blurred through the rain, the cold night air a sharp contrast to the suffocating corruption behind them. They didn't speak, only ran. Each step a vow to fight harder, to protect their family's legacy no matter the cost. Back in the safety of Mara's home, soaked and breathless, they collapsed into chairs, exhaustion mingling with the fierce glow of determination. "We've rattled the cage," Elijah said. "Now we prepare for what comes next." Mara's eyes burned with quiet fire. "We finish this. Together." The morning sun filtered weakly through the grimy windows of the small office Mara had converted into their command center. Maps, photographs, and hastily scrawled notes covered the walls like a chaotic tapestry, each piece a thread in the sprawling web they were determined to unravel. Elijah stood by the whiteboard, marker in hand, tracing connections between names, places, and incidents, a complex puzzle of corruption, blackmail, and hidden agendas that Gregory Cole had meticulously constructed over decades. Mara sat nearby, laptop open, eyes scanning the latest intelligence from their private investigator. Her jaw was set, mind sharp but weary, the weight of the fight pressing on her like a physical burden. "We can't just expose Cole," Elijah said, turning to Mara. "We need to dismantle his network piece by piece. If we go after him directly, he'll crush us." Mara nodded. "We need allies. People inside the system who want out, who want change." Elijah frowned. "There are a few names in the investigator's report. People with grudges, people who've been burned. We approach carefully, build trust." Mara's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I'll reach out tonight." Discreetly, as plans took shape, the emotional toll was impossible to ignore. Late nights blurred into early mornings, phone calls filled with coded messages, and an unrelenting fear that their every move was watched. One evening, Mara found herself alone in the garden beneath the elm tree. The soft rustling of leaves was a fragile comfort against the storm raging inside her. She thought of their mother, the woman who had fought so fiercely to protect them, who had kept secrets that nearly destroyed their family. A sudden presence startled her. Elijah stepped into the moonlight, exhaustion shadowing his features. "You okay?" he asked gently. Mara forced a smile. "I will be." "We're close." He sat beside her, the silence between them full but unspoken. Days later, discreet meetings with informants began to bear fruit. Whispers of corruption, names of complicit officials, evidence of bribery and cover-ups flowed into their hands like lifeblood. But with every step forward, the danger escalated. One contact disappeared without a trace, another survived a mysterious car accident. Clear warnings meant to intimidate. Elijah's expression hardened. "They're scared. They know we're serious." Mara's voice was fierce. "When we push harder." Amid the chaos, a breakthrough arrived. A whistleblower within the police department ready to testify. Her courage was a beacon, a sign that change was possible. Mara and Elijah worked tirelessly to protect her, knowing that their window was small and the cost of failure immense. The night before the planned exposure, Mara and Elijah stood once more beneath the elm tree, the city skyline twinkling like distant stars. "We've come so far," Mara whispered. Elijah took her hand firmly. "No matter what happens tomorrow, we stand together." The wind carried their whispered promises, a solemn vow forged in the fires of their shared battle. The city buzzed beneath a heavy, restless sky as dawn broke over Maple Avenue. The air was thick with anticipation and unease. a collective breath held, waiting for the inevitable storm. Mara and Elijah moved with purposeful urgency, their every step a defiant echo against years of silence and fear. Inside the cramped conference room of a local news station, a small group gathered: Mara, Elijah, their trusted private investigator, the whistleblower officer, a woman named Detective Lila Grant, and a handful of journalists hungry for truth. The flicker of fluorescent lights cast sharp shadows, outlining faces etched with tension and resolve. Mara's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the stack of documents on the table, evidence meticulously compiled over months. Financial records, recorded conversations, photographic proof linking Gregory Cole and his cronies to bribery, threats, and abuse of power. Elijah leaned in, his voice low but steady. "Remember, this isn't just about us. It's about everyone Cole's destroyed." Detective Grant's eyes burned with a fierce determination. "I'm ready to testify." No matter what, the journalists checked their equipment, the cameras poised like silent sentinels ready to capture the moment the truth would finally break free. As the broadcast went live, Mara's heart pounded in rhythm with the camera's blinking red light. She took a deep breath, standing shoulder to shoulder with Elijah and Lila. The lead journalist began, voice smooth but grave. "Tonight, a family's courage exposes a network of corruption that has gripped our city for decades." One by one, the evidence was presented, irrefutable and damning. As Detective Grant recounted the dark dealings within the police force, the room seemed to shrink under the weight of the revelations. Gregory Cole's name was uttered with increasing frequency, his empire of deceit unraveling before the eyes of the public. Outside the studio, the city erupted. News vans converged, headlines blazed across screens, and a storm of outrage swept through the streets. But inside, Mara and Elijah faced a new battle: the personal cost of exposing power. Threatening calls bombarded their phones. Their homes were surveilled. Anonymous messages promised retaliation. Yet despite the fear, their resolve did not waver. In the quiet moments between chaos, Mara and Elijah found strength in each other. Their past grievances dissolved in the face of shared purpose. One night, as they sat beneath the elm tree, their silent witness, Mara whispered, "We did it. We faced the darkness." Elijah nodded, eyes shining with tears he refused to shed. Together, weeks passed. Gregory Cole was arrested, his network dismantled piece by piece. The city breathed anew, tentative but hopeful. Mara and Elijah rebuilt not just their family's name, but the fragile trust that had once seemed lost forever. They knew scars remained, reminders of the battles fought and the cost paid. But beneath the healing, a deeper bond flourished, born of pain, resilience, and a love rekindled stronger than ever. The crisp spring air smelled of fresh earth and blooming jasmine, carrying a promise of renewal that seemed to seep into every corner of Maple Avenue. The once overgrown gardens of 47 and 48 Maple Avenue had been tamed, vibrant flowers pushing their way through softened soil, symbolizing a family slowly growing back together. Mara stood barefoot on her porch, the warmth of the morning sun soaking into her skin, grounding her in the present, a gift she hadn't dared hope for. She traced her fingers over the wooden railing, the grain smooth beneath her touch, much like the delicate bond she now shared with Elijah. Elijah joined her moments later, carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea. He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that had become more frequent with each passing day. "Remember the treehouse?" he asked, handing her a mug. Mara laughed softly. "Our fortress against the world." He took a slow sip, eyes reflecting the clear blue sky. "Maybe it's time we build a new one, stronger. Together." They sat in companionable silence, watching children play beneath the elm tree, their laughter echoing like a balm to years of pain and loss. The scars remained, faint but permanent, reminders of battles fought, secrets unearthed, and sacrifices made. Mara sometimes caught herself reaching for her phone, half expecting threats or bad news, but those moments grew fewer, replaced by quiet confidence and the steady rhythm of healing. Elijah had found work in a community center, mentoring youth, and channeling his experiences into guiding others away from the darkness that once ensnared him. Mara, inspired by her mother's bravery, began volunteering for a non-profit supporting families torn apart by violence and corruption. Their shared mission extended beyond their own healing, a commitment to change that honored the past by shaping a better future. One evening, surrounded by old photographs, letters, and new memories in the making, Mara and Elijah sat cross-legged on the living room floor. "We're more than just siblings now," Mara said, eyes shining. "We're partners, friends, family." Elijah nodded, pulling her into a warm embrace. "And nothing can break that again." Outside, the stars shimmered softly, a silent witness to a story of rivalry rekindled, wounds confronted, and love reborn. Years had passed since the storm had shattered their silence and pulled Mara and Elijah back from the brink of a fractured past. The neighborhood had changed, trees grown taller, children playing beneath branches that once stood witness to pain and distance. But the greatest transformation was within themselves. Mara stood by the window of her cozy home, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and lavender. Her heart was full, no longer weighed down by old grudges or hidden truths, but lightened by forgiveness and renewed love. Elijah entered quietly, carrying a box of photographs and memorabilia from their childhood. He smiled softly, the familiar warmth between them now unbreakable. "Remember this?" he asked, holding up a faded picture of two kids in front of the elm tree. The same tree that had witnessed their pain and healing. Mara nodded, tears glistening. "Our beginning, and our new start." They sat together, stories flowing easily now, of lost years reclaimed, of battles fought and won, and of a future they would build side by side. In the quiet of that evening, the siblings who once were torn apart by jealousy and secrets finally found peace, not just in each other but within themselves. The rivalry that had once threatened to consume them was rekindled not as a flame of destruction, but as the steady, glowing embers of a love reborn. Because some bonds are too strong to break, and some wounds too deep not to heal. Together, Mara and Elijah stepped forward, no longer estranged siblings, but family reunited, carrying the past as a guide, not a chain. And beneath the same elm tree, their story came full circle. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching. If you loved it and you would love for more, kindly comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.